without further ado, what are the most significant advantages and challenges of using emerging technologies in cybersecurity, and can these technologies replace traditional security tools? That is the question. Let's begin with Vasiliki.
Hello, thank you. So I'm a little bit embarrassed because my co-panelists are impressive and they talked a lot about the... what? No.
I'm okay. It was part of the show. It was part of the show to get your attention.
We've seen this on television.
I'm sorry.
A few weeks ago.
Sorry.
No worries.
Pripomína mi to toho Huliaka trošku.
It was intended. I'm sorry.
Before. You're not the first one, a zďaleka nie ste prvý, ktorému sa to stalo.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries at all. So,
oh my God.
In contrast to what they mentioned, I come from ENISA. As you know, ENISA is the European Agency for Cybersecurity in Europe. We're struggling to prepare technical guidelines and information.
Yeah, be careful.
I'm the next one. Okay.
I'm an expert on that, so yeah.
I guess I fall in 2 minutes or so. So we're trying to build upon this complex environment of regulation in Europe, some guidelines and some reports. And the thing is that we're really struggling not to be autistic in that effort and to be open to what is happening to the world. And it's a lot happening. So we just try to get the numerous pieces of legislation, or like NIS2, DORA, the CRA, the Cybersecurity Act that has been currently reviewed and is trying to be amended by the European Commission, and to put the pieces together. And this is not easy. So I came to this panel to just talk on how we plan to work with emerging technologies and how foresight could work on that part at ENISA, and being really in a place where we produce the threat landscapes, we identify the threats, but we cannot really forecast what will happen in 7 years or even more. We build also a framework for foresight. It's a crystal ball exercise on trying to be out of the box and expect some technological developments. So I would urge you to go to ENISA's foresight. I don't have a slide to go to our website. There is a methodology that we're trying to build on how to proceed with that. Apart from that, I think I have not much more to say. It really depends on the questions.
Yeah.
So let's have a discussion on...
Sure. Actually, I appreciate the question and your introduction with for ENISA. I think that you said it's complex, it's difficult. Oh boy, it is. It is. Because cybersecurity and cyber resiliency and assurance and the supply chain that Uros was mentioning is made out of different risks. The risk of your supply chain, the risk of the vendor, the risk of your devices, the risk of, and it's identity, data, and applications. And I am oversimplifying an enterprise architecture. Just saying that any company on the planet, Volkswagen and any other here, identities, data, and applications. But when you realize identities, data, and applications is about who has access to what, right? But who has access to what? In cloud, on-prem, devices, applications, infrastructures, and then the legislation and your work at ENISA and we at ISACA, you know, it has to follow all those challenges in plural, please. All those risks in plural, please. So it's very complex. Your question was, how difficult it is and the technology. So I applaud and celebrate, you know, the existence of ENISA, but I absolutely concur. It's not easy. It's difficult. It's a universe of technologies. I always say that this is very visual, that the attack surface is expanding. It's like the universe. It's never diminishing. It's never getting little, right? The surface of attack expands because suddenly it's another TikTok, another application, another network, another app, another... Oh boy, it's growing. And that combined with legislation, that's difficult, right? Uros, what do you think? Is it difficult also with NIS, with DORA, GDPR, right?
Yeah, so basically based on my personal experience, what I can compliment ENISA for is that the legislation is now aligning. If I had situations with clients where 10 years ago, they would ask me like, legislation 1 says I should do this, but I have legislation 2 that says absolutely do not do this. So which one should I listen to? And those were quite common. Now the new ones, the NIS2, the DORA, they're pretty much aligned. There might be some overlaps and still, but I mean, improvement was made significantly. As an auditor, obviously, if anybody has ever been audited, you probably know the first thing an auditor asks you is like, what are your policies? Can I have your policies, your documents? You want this. So basically from this side, this is all great. But I also want to play the devil's advocate because there's always two sides to the story. You know, on one side, we are regulating and we are setting the minimal standards, which is great because we are improving the cyber posture of Europe by doing so. I can tell you from personal experience, a lot of new companies are now being pulled into this and will devote much more focus on cybersecurity and cyber resilience as they did before, right? So this is all positive. There's the other side where they keep saying, well, but if we are so heavily regulated and if so much is required from us, that kind of reduces our competitive advantage compared to other companies that do not have to follow those rules, right?
Yep.
DORA, for example, is also pretty cruel. It's a vast amount of requirements, which I completely understand when you're talking about systemic banks. Obviously, you need to have controls in place. You need to have all these mechanisms in place. But then you have the situation of an asset management fund, which is run by 11 people, just one too much to be a micro company. And you have 11 people now, and you tell them, like, you should apply the full DORA scope, which basically translated means you should hire 15 more people to focus on assuring compliance. So that is an issue. Now, if we just try to streamline and say, like, well, we should take the path of no regulation, it's going to make us more competitive, we have to also remember one thing. Where are all the chip makers coming from? We have them in China. We have them now establishing more and more in US. So basically, there's certainly a risk to every European that we will be going through technology that will be abusing the data that we are pushing through it, that will actually install some malware or some listening or some sort of spyware on it, and we won't know about it. So therefore, we should be regulated. So the idea was not to confuse you. I just wanted to say that there's a good side to everything. It's great that we have this. It can be sometimes difficult. It's competitively less advantage in that sense. It might be a competitive advantage in the sense of being more secure and having better products. So I think it's a good direction, but I also think time will tell, and we need to make sure, you know, the one thing that I've learned as one of the most important things is that the only constant is change. And those who are able to adjust and adapt, those are going to be the winners of tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We have super interesting questions from our participants. So do you want to pick one?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to group three. I'm seeing them here, you know, so thank you for the questions. I appreciate that most of them, not all of them, are from quantum, but I don't want to steal the thunder from my colleagues, so I'm going to squeeze three of them into one very rapid response. When can we expect new EU quantum regulation? I know that EU is over-regulating. We have AI and NIS, DORA, but I don't think that we can have a quantum regulation for the European Union soon, because we are losing that battle. Ooh, that's a statement. Yes, we're losing that battle. Yeah. I mean, actually, we in Spain, we are trying to create the first quantum computer in Southern Europe with 1 qubit. 1. And I said 10 minutes ago that we have people in the world with 2,000 qubits already and running. So we have lost that battle. Actually, the European Union, with a quantum manifesto, it was an initiative in 2016 that we, Europe, as a region, we were going to share 1 billion, the American one, euros, the whole Europe. Austria, and then Spain, and then Belgium, and France, and Greece, and okay, that's a massive amount of money, 1,000 million euros, right? 1 billion, the American billion, right? Only one laboratory in China is 10,000 millions of euros, 10x. Only one laboratory. We have lost that battle. So, unfortunately, for the first question, not soon. We are late already in that race, okay? Do you think quantum computing can be used to solve the massive energy requirements for Gen AI algorithms? Well, yes and no. It can solve the problem, but they require massive, quantum computers require massive amount of energy. Despite what you see in the brochures, I mean, you go to Google's The Wave, the brochure, the $15 million computer, and they say that they're super green, super clean, that they only use a fraction of energy. That's not true. That's not true. So they can solve the problem of energy, but they consume vast amount of energy themselves. There was another like, that we are losing the battle in Europe, so yes. And with all due respect, Africa is not even in the game, you know? So basically it's Australia in the University of Waterloo, not the Waterloo here in Belgium, in Europe, but the Waterloo in Australia. Then Canada, then Austria is very good. In Vienna, they're doing great things with quantum, right? Something little in Spain, but the rest is basically China and the US, basically. So forget about Latin America, I'm sorry, forget about Africa. So what I'm seeing, and I'm saying the following, and I'm shutting my mouth, on a geopolitical aspect and regulational aspect as well, and then my colleagues will take it from here if they will, it's an unbalanced world. Like the nuclear power, there are only 6 countries on the planet with the atomic bomb, remember? Only 6. The atomic bomb, they are only 6. So it's not, with all due respect, and I don't know if the metaphor works, the comparison works well, flies well, but it's not that different. I'm talking about dominance. I said 15 minutes ago about a world with no secrets. That's what I'm talking about. Nuclear codes, the Coca-Cola formula, the next ibuprofen, you know, medicine, the next, you name it, strategies of defense. That's what I'm talking about here. Any encryption known by humans today. That challenges the game. So I try to capture 3 or 4 in terms of the realities. But back to you, or back to you guys.
Basically, that was the answer to the question. Does the EU have a chance to catch up with the world in its development?
I'm sorry. We are trying. Good. But we will fail. Not to that point. We are already late to the game. And especially, remember, sorry, chip making, you know the drill. This is not just for quantum computing, and then I will leave my colleagues to correct me if they think I'm wrong. Not just in terms of quantum. You know, NVIDIA is not a European company. Qualcomm is not a European company. And then you know the rest, the big 4, the big 5. So what do we have in Europe? We can regulate. And I'm sorry, I'm very critical with that, but that's how I see. I mean, the only thing that we can do is regulate and get the right guardrails and barriers, because in terms of innovation and development, I'm sorry, we have lost already that race, I think, unfortunately. We are not Singapore, we are not Taiwan, we are not China, we are not the US, right? So that's my answer, unfortunately.
Vasiliki.
Yeah, well.
I'm sorry if I'm critic, but yeah.
You have to be.
Okay.
There's also a competition report published by Mario Draghi saying exactly these problems. We overregulate, indeed.
Correct.
There are numbers, but we do have minds. We have a lot of skill.
Yes.
Most of the innovation is coming from Europe, but surprisingly it goes out of it and leaves the continent, so we have to work on this. So there's no need, we cannot afford to be, negating the truth. But for what it's worth, Europe is preparing and producing and implementing transparency and rules. And this is not as naive as it sounds. So it's nice to have democracy. It's nice to have rules.
Oh, sure. Of course.
It's not always easy to be in China,
No, absolutely. I mean, I didn't mean it that way. Of course, rules are great and laws are great. Over-regulating sometimes is a problem, but absolutely, we need. Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, the contrary is chaos. I mean, don't get me wrong. Absolutely, I want to state that. I mean, the contrary of rules and laws and barriers and controls is chaos, and no one wants to live in chaos. I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
yes,
but for what it's worth, we really have to try on the skills part, because skills is the main shortage for cybersecurity and for whatever we want to implement on a regulation for cyber. So we are being attacked from all these technology leaps. We have to bring some rules and regulations for that. As Uroš said, indeed, at least we're not contradicting each other for a change. We have a lot of work ahead to make it like really, practical and working. But we're working towards it. At least understanding the problem is half of the solution, I believe.
Okay, you did mention collaboration just now, so let's talk about that. What role does international cooperation play in building robust cybersecurity frameworks? Uroš.
Well, basically, it's a key thing, and I think EU has realized that. If we look at the new regulations, the most two popular that I mentioned, NIS2 and DORA, they both actually try to establish a sort of community where the information is shared. Now, there has to be a shift of focus, and this is a problem still with the market today, at least in Europe. In US, it has moved. It was mentioned, I've actually spent 5 years working in US, and the things that we were dealing with over there are now slowly coming to Europe. Right? I said 61% of attacks, they were the first ones exposed. They did the same mistakes that we do here. In the beginning, they were hiding it. Anybody who was hacked was hiding it. You saw those stupid situations where people were interviewed, like what happened, and the first person came and said, like, nothing's happening, everything's fine, it's completely okay. The second person came and said, like, wow, it was a problem, but it's completely under control. The first person was like, oh my God, I have no idea, I'm super panicking right now. I hope everything's fine, it's horrible. So they went through all those steps and learned that, like, hey, we have to have one common message. We need to prepare in advance. This is why, if we look at DORA, it's not talking about cybersecurity. It's talking about cyber resilience. So it's saying not how to just prevent things from happening. It's focusing more on, like, how will I act when things are happening? Because that is the moment where you want to have people know what they need to do. You know, when you have a fire in your house, that's not the best time to say, like, let me check the manual and see what it says on page 3, 4, cover yourself. No, at that point, you have to react, right? And we have to prepare them for that. So the biggest effort of all these regulations is now that we have a common understanding, that everybody starts to understand that it can happen to anyone. It's not shameful if it happened to you. If you share that knowledge, others can improve from it. And we still see that as a problem back, at least in Slovenia, where people are hiding it. I don't want to tell anyone because it makes me look weak, it makes me look unprepared. But then another person is attacked the same way, and it could have been prevented. So now with the CSIRTs of each country, they're going to be collecting all the information from NIS2 constituents. We are going to have the regulators, which is going to be the national banks, the insurance supervisors, and so on and so on. They will be collecting information. The idea is all this information is shared across EU, so that if we see that something is happening in Portugal and it's spreading, all the other countries are going to be able to benefit from it. Yep. Because at this moment, we were talking, and this is a upcoming technologies kind of idea, AI currently is helping attackers more than defenders. That might change one day, but right now, when the situation is like this, we need to do our best to fight together. And only with that common knowledge, with that common group approach, do we stand a chance against the people on the offensive side.
Okay, let's continue with the practical aspect. Uroš, thank you. How much time do we have left until traditional crypto is broken? That's a question from Rado, the first one that you see. 10 years, how to protect our assets.
Let me get that one, and then I will combine it with another two that I'm seeing here. I said it on my session, probably was too fast. 7, 9, 12 years. Some people say by 2030, that's 6 years from now. I don't think so. But the physicists and the mathematicians I'm working with, they say that we will get to 10,000 qubits around, and this is when the problem will really rise, is 7, 9 to 12 years. And again, that's very fast. Very important. We are now at 2,000 qubit-ish, more or less, all right? The moment as when we are growing into more qubits, what they called error correction is getting more and more difficult. Error correction means, remember that we're talking about photons of light here. So photons, light flies, light goes, right? So trapping a photon of light with 2,000, in a grid of 2,000 qubits, it's easier than in a grid of 8,000 qubits and 10,000 qubits. So this is why this will not happen tomorrow. Certainly, it is not happening in 30 years from now. What I said on stage today is not in 50 years' time, it's not a Star Trek session. It's not a Star Wars session. It is something that will happen, not tomorrow, not in 2026, but in 7, 9 to 10 years, we will have 10,000 qubits, and then we will be able to run effectively and in an efficient way, Shor's algorithm. That was one. Another one, what will happen with AI and quantum computers combined? We're already working on that. Actually, I'm seeing your card, and I am betting another thing. and blockchain and quantum, and everything on quantum, you know, when the crossroads meet, like, remember, speed and computing power? Remember what I said that? So apply that to basically everything, to tokenization, data protection, encryption, curing cancer. When you apply the speed and computing power unparalleled, ladies and gentlemen, we have not seen anything like that before. Remember, classical computing, even the fastest computing on the planet, compared to a new beast, you know? So this is what I'm talking about. So what will happen when AI combined with quantum? Wow. I mean, I don't know. And blockchain and quantum, and data protection and quantum, because it changes the name of the game. Well, but go back to you. I have other things to say, but I wanted to at least capture 2 or 3 questions that are relevant for quantum. But back to you, if you will. Okay? But there was another one. Sorry, very fast. What we can do now beyond being informed? Well, you can do nothing these days except being informed. How many of you knew about quantum this morning at 9 a.m.? 1, 2, 3, 10. That's great. But it is not mainstream, but that deserves some cultural approach, deserves a couple of reading on white papers. There's free available information on the internet. I'm pretty sure that ENISA has something. We at ISACA, no? Okay. So we at ISACA, that's good. We at ISACA, we have a couple of white papers. Me, I'm traveling the world with my sessions on quantum computing and other things, you know? I mean it. So it deserves a conversation. That's what I'm saying. While you still need to do a million other things on auditing, monitoring, legislation, regulation, endpoint protection, identity management, application security, of course, one of those things is reading, learning, being informed, understanding that a photon of light, and then it changes, it breaks encryption. Any encryption that we have been creating for decades, it can be gone when Shor's algorithm is run. So that's the third question that was there. But back to you and back to my colleagues.
Just
sure.
What Ramses said.
Of course.
We have a problem with the standards here. So we have the US. They start, they lead. There's no point in reinventing the wheel on that one.
Good point.
So EU cannot proceed with quantum regulation without having the standardization first. It's a purely technical cooperation level that we need to work upon.
Good point. Yeah.
Okay, is there a question out of this? Because we have 8 minutes. Uroš, if you're looking at the question.
I think most of the questions are from quantum, which is Ramses' field.
I'm sorry, no. But
Ramses, it's great. Basically, I always love it when people are interested in up-and-coming technologies. So I think Ramses can take on.
But actually, let me challenge you, Uroš. I mean, Uroš and I were friends, you know. But you're an expert on auditing and monitoring, you know. Quantum is very difficult. By the way, I didn't say it on my 20 minutes because I was short. But observing quantum. Remember when I talk about superposition? And I have a question for you. But remember that I mentioned superposition. I have another word for you. Entanglement. Entanglement. One photon of light is entangled with its same photon is the same, I don't know, thousands of kilometers away. I mean it. If you don't believe me, you can go and check in the University of Physics. It's entangled, okay? Actually, when you become the quantum observer, when you observe or you try to break that entanglement, you break it because you are actually checking, you are, quote unquote, auditing. So I have a question for you as an auditor. When I ask questions as an auditor, when I check with my kids, you know, when I ask you a question, I am altering reality because actually I am checking just because I am part of the problem or part of the solution, just because I'm asking you. In reality, were you going to answer me that? Or is it because I'm challenging? You know what I mean? So from an auditing perspective, just because I know I am being audited, just because I am checking, does it alters reality? I think that's a beautiful thing for auditing. What do you think? I mean, you become part of the problem solution because I'm checking? You know? I know it's a little bit philosophical, but I want to challenge you, my friend.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, obviously, as any auditor, I would like to make sure that at least I have to believe that we are making a difference, right? So that we are making a change. Now, I can also tell you, I've pretty much worked across all of Europe, and I've had the 5 years of my US experience, and I've seen some very different approaches. You know, when you're saying, like, is sometimes enough to have an auditor ask you questions, because a lot of people look at auditors and say like, well, you don't know as much as I do about this technology. Why are you auditing me? It's not my job to know as much about the technology as you. It's my job to think of risk and all those things. So this is why I explain to the clients like, well, but thank God you're here to guide me and explain to me how, because I need them to understand, to make me understand. The one thing that I wanted to say is that it's ironic because I've seen, let's say, Scandinavia. They're very proactive. You know, they do things because they're good business practice. An auditor comes there, asks questions, and you ask something that they haven't thought of, and they're like, ooh, that's a good point. We need to do that. You know, they do concepts. They were doing certain projects. I'll never forget this. Years ago, I was working for a different company, not for Vismazars yet. And my boss told me, like, hey, in Scandinavia, they're doing amazingly well on data privacy. They're selling millions. You should talk to the guys there and ask them, like, why does this happen? So I talked to the guys. They were presenting it. It's like great, amazing opportunities. So I finished off with a very practical question. I said, like, okay, so what is the legislation or the requirement that makes everybody buy this service? He looked at me like an idiot. He was like, well, it's good business practice. I said, like, well, I'm from the Balkans. You know, a good business practice is rarely a good enough answer for anyone to do. So do I make a change in our countries? I would like to believe so. It's significantly lower. Until the regulation comes, people do not act. So in this way, the auditor can also contribute. Mm-hmm. Because just the fact that you are coming there to ask them questions usually makes them prepare. But as I said, the southern you go, the more southern, and I'm not getting to Greece, I'm talking about ex-Yugoslavia, which I know pretty well because I've been active in this field. If Slovenia is still semi-proactive, you go Serbia, Bosnia, I mean, it's not enough to have a law. The question is, but is the regulator checking it? And am I being fined for it? You know,
server.
And even in Slovenia, that is also true. You know, we've had requirements for SWIFT audits for years. And then I think from 2017, they officially stated that you have to do it. Then in 2020 or 21, they came out and said, like, we will actually inspect those who are doing it. Suddenly, we had 15 banks asking us for this service. The year before, 0. You know, so it kind of shows the logic. But
Uroš, there is one last question at the bottom of the page,
Uroš,
which is specifically for
you.
you.
For NIS as well.
Your opinion on the NIS2 directive. Do you consider state institutions in Slovenia to be resistant to cyber attacks?
Somebody is trying to get me fired or penalized in Slovenia.
This is being recorded, let me remind you.
Yeah, no, so here's the thing. I mean, the approaches are different. Obviously, there's a lot of state institutions, so I would say some are, I've had the experience of actually working with some. Some are surprisingly well organized and are actually thinking ahead. Some are completely, just delusional and saying like, well, I don't think this is our problem. But is anybody really resistant against cyber attacks? I've mentioned before, we have to lose this mentality. Nobody's resistant. The question is how much time, how much money, how much skill they have, and how much motivation they have. Mm-hmm. If they have all those, and this is why we're talking about those country-sponsored actors that are the most dangerous because they usually have all those. Once you have that, you can barely help yourself. You better prepare yourself to how to react when you are attacked than to try to be completely resistant.
Vasilika, I've noticed a question there. I don't know if it's still there, from Ivan. I really appreciate that. It said, do you think AI will eventually replace such great presenters such as yourselves? Specifically AI with QC.
Short answer. It has already been done. I mean, not physically with holograms, but you can be taught a cybersecurity lesson by Morgan Freeman these days, by Scarlett Johansson. You want to have Scarlett Johansson as a teacher telling you about encryption? The
question is, are they going to get a salary? Morgan Freeman and Scarlett Johansson?
No. They will not. Actually, they will not have rights in the terms of our laws. But it's economically possible and technologically viable to have a good teacher in the voice and the language that you want, I'm talking about Zoom or Teams, of course, virtual, right? So it has already been done.
She actually filed a lawsuit a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Scarlett Johansson,
it's-
because there is an AI voice that is
Yeah, but you can have a teacher.
identical to hers. Yeah.
There's a question over there, I guess.
I'll give you the microphone.
But you need the
okay?
mic.
1 second. Can you stand up, please?
So I have a question if it will be able somehow to defend the quantum cyber attack, and if it is, like, if are there attempts to make some kind of protection against it right now?
Thank you for the question. If I understood it correctly, to resist a quantum attack, that was the question. Well, yeah, with post-quantum encryption. But as you were saying, we need to agree. Yeah, I mean, if someone is attacking me with a quantum machine, I need to at least be sure that my castle is robust and solid. But we, the world, we need to agree on one sort of encryption in the very same way that we agree on 5G and Wi-Fi and standards, going back to your point, we need to agree. And there are a couple of countries in the planet that say, we agree that we disagree. We agree that I am not interested on agreeing on something where I am the leader and you are not. That I have an advantage and you are not, like nuclear power. So we are kind of doomed, and certainly standards and regulations are important, absolutely. So, ouch. Ouch.
And we absolutely agree that this was fantastic. This was amazing insight to the future, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank
you so much for the beginning of this day.
Thank you,
Please
guys.
give it up for Vasiliki,
Thank you very much.
Ramses, Uroš. And I have to say, I really appreciate the gender balance on the stage as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
We don't
Thank you,
take it
guys.
for granted, and thank you so much for being here with us. Ďakujeme ešte raz veľmi pekne.
After you, sir.
Môžem obrovský potlesk pre Uroša, Ramsesa, Vasiliky.